when I first started, I was thrown in the deep end with a load of real cool, top-class musicians of the day.
That's the Ted Heath Orchestra.
This was the Ted Heath Orchestra. And I couldn't read a note of music. And they gave me a bad time. You know?
Snobbery, yeah.
Yeah, that is the trouble with England. There's so much musical snobbery.
Right.
You don't get this in America. There isn't that kind of, especially in Nashville.
Yeah.
You know, you can be a rotten player out there, but if you play with feel and gusto, they love you.
Yeah.
They're not musical snobs, whereas over here it's, you know, what you doing there? Oh, that's clever.
Yeah.
I'll give you a good example of this, actually. When I started early on, when I was about 18 in this big show, my brief was I had to learn all the American guitar solos that the Americans would send their records over, not being able to read, and I'd have to learn the solos, you see.
Right.
So one of the first solos I get is a Jimmy Burton solo, which this guy's incredible, and it nearly killed me to try to learn it. I got away with it, but I still don't know it. But that was what I used to have to do. Well, Jack Good, the producer, was a very sort of thoughtful man. And I had to sit in the band with everyone else, and I had my parts, you know, and I could read the chord parts, but I couldn't read all the fiddly stuff. And one day, and there was 2 other guitar players in the band, and I was the lead guitar player. Now, that didn't go down too well with them, right? But the thing was that one day, I look at my music stand, and I pick this piece of music up, and it's black with dots, notes all over it, and I couldn't work it out at all. So I'm really nervous about it. So I asked the MD, I said, excuse me, but what is this? Oh, he said, don't worry about that. He said, what that is, he said, we made a tape recording of the stuff that you played on last week's show, and I got the transposers to write it down for you. This is what you played last week. He said, so what you have to do is if you can listen to the tape, get your guitar and compare it with what you played, you'll have some idea about, you know, what it was all about. So I thought this was a great idea.
Right.
So while I'm sitting there looking at it, next thing I know, one of the other guitar players comes over, he looks over his shoulder at it like that, and I said to him, "Oi, can you read that?" And he looked at it, he said, "I can't read that, no, I can't read that." I said to the other one, "Here, can you read that?" He looked at it, he said, "No, I can't read that." These are top guys, you know. I said, "Oh, I can't read it either." I said, "But I can play it." And that kind of shut them up for a while, you know. But it was hard work in those early days, and those were that kind of snobbery.
Very,
you know.
very English snobbery, isn't it?
Yeah, it's such a shame, really, because music is a wonderful thing and it should be available to everybody. And it's easy to knock it.
Yeah. If we could go right back before the Ted Heath days, right back to you, the Cockney, in the East End in the 1950s, and I get the impression, reading through your book, Brown Sauce, I get the impression that right from the word go, you were a ducker and diver. Would I be right in that? You were sort of helping sell electricity to jellied eel stalls and stuff like that. You had a sort of keen eye for survival.
You had to make a living, mate.
Yeah,
you know, and yes, it's true. In those days, we never got into any trouble, apart from the fact that we used to do a bit of running for the bookie, you know. But that wasn't considered a crime, you know. It was illegal, but I don't think it was a crime. But in those days, you know, there was loads of bomb sites lying around, and the kids used to go around and pick up anything they could, you know, that was lying about. Me and my mate Dennis found 200 weight of lead once lying around on this church roof. I remember that. But no, they were, you know, it was a rough old place. But don't get me wrong, I'm not complaining. To me, it's all grist to the mill. Yeah. You know, I mean, it's like when I first started to work for Larry Parnes. I worked for two years without a single night off, for 15 quid a week.
That's funny, because that was going to be my next question. You know, did all this, you know, what you learned in the East End in the 1950s, you know, you had to survive and you had to be canny, and your mum's was somebody who didn't suffer fools gladly at all. She threw them out the pub window.
Yeah, she did too. I remember her chucking this bloke straight through this plate glass window. Harry Young, his name was. He tried to kiss her. She had a great technique. She put her arm between his legs, underneath, and grabbed his belt from the back, and then got him round the throat with this hand, and hauled him like that. Well, of course, with the pressure where it shouldn't have been, off he went, and he went straight through this plate glass window. Right. Harry Young, yeah. Oh, she was a tough woman, my mum, but there she was, stuck in the East End of London. My old man was bedridden. She was looking after 2 fully grown men, that was my uncle and his son, 2 kids, and running the pub as well and doing everything. That poor woman never sat down. She worked and worked and worked all her life, and I never heard her complain. You know, you just got to get on with it in situations like that. But I often get a bit annoyed at these people that say, oh, you know, he's had a deprived upbringing, poor kid this and poor kid that. I feel much more sympathy for the older people. Young kids, young people, it's amazing how they adapt.
Yeah.
And I can't remember ever being unhappy.
Right. Well, the kind of life that you saw there in the East End, did it when you came across the music business and the music business being the haven of sharks and shysters, mentioning no names, did it wise you up before you got in there, or did you get, like everybody else who's new to the business, did you get ripped off?
Oh yeah, I mean, but I never cared about it. I didn't care. I still don't care about it. You see, when we started, we were young musicians, if you like, and when all these entrepreneurs started, they were young entrepreneurs, so they had to learn as well. You know, we're doing it at the same time, and if they could rip you off, they would. It was par for the course, really, and I don't regret a minute of it.
Right.
Because the only thing I regret about that being ripped off is that all the records and stuff that I made, I had no quality control over them, and the problem being that a lot of the stuff that went out on record, on Joe Brown Records, wasn't even recorded. It was recorded, but it was done for radio shows. We used to go along and do the Billy Cotton Band show. We used to do it every few weeks. We was doing a radio show, taking the band in and playing. We used to play things like Won't You Come Home, Bill Bailey, anything.
Yeah.
And my manager used to give the engineer a $5, cop the tape. Next thing I know, it's out on a record. No royalties or anything for me.
Wow.
And this is still going on.
Yeah.
They're still selling my records, and I still don't get any royalties off of them.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
I really don't care. Couldn't care less.
So in the route to Joe Brown, becoming Joe Brown, the first British rock and roller guitar player, a guy called George Dance figures in that, doesn't he?
Georgie, yeah. He was the bloke that used to play the guitar in our pub, George, and he was a wonderful man. It was a great ceremony for George. He used to get this old guitar out and he'd, come on George, give us a tune, and all go, come on George, get it. He'd get the guitar out and he'd get a box of matches out of his pocket and he'd sort of strike one like that and wait and blow it out when it had a nice point on it, and then he'd use it as a play drum. But it was all the ceremony concerned with doing it, you know. But poor old George, he had I don't know if he had a speech impediment or what, but he always used to pick the wrong songs to sing. You know, he'd sing these country and western songs, and always seemed to pick the wrong songs to sing.
Right.
You know, with his speech impediment, because they'd all crease up in irreverent laughter, and old George thought he was the greatest thing in the world.
But you wrote in the book that also there was a lot of music that you heard in those early days that wasn't rock and roll, it wasn't anything to do with that was all traditional pub music that you still play today, don't you?
Absolutely.
Habanagila was Mrs. O, was it? That
well, you know, it's funny because I got famous for putting the guitar behind the back of my head and playing it behind the back of my head, and I didn't invent this. I mean, there used to be a bloke in the pub when I was a little boy, 13 years old. This bloke used to come in the pub and play the banjo like that.
Right.
And I thought this was incredible. You know, and one night I was on stage and I just slung it out with a guitar and they went mad. But what a terrible cross to bear.
Yeah, from then onwards.
All my life I've had to do it like that.
Right.
And it's never sounded right as a result of it, but I can't do it anymore. I had my doctor in one night, he came to see the show because I had a problem with my back, and he said, don't do that. Don't do that anymore. I said, well, I expect it. He said, I'll write you a note.
Yeah. And George Dance, you got your first guitar from him, you were about 12 years old.
I paid him £1 for it. But the thing was, I didn't know how to tune it up or anything. I just thought when the strings was tight, it was in tune. But I thought, no, there must be more to it than that. And George used to tune it up. When he gave it to me, he was tuning up the way he used to tune it up. And this is the way I learned. And it was like 2 years I was at it before I found out that perhaps I'd better tune it up properly, you know, and sort of start again, really.
Right.
But no, they were great days. Georgie Dance, he wasn't on his own. He had 3 brothers. He had Arthur Dance, Bubba dance, and another Billy dance, was it? And they were all kind of musicians.
Mm-hmm.
And George played the guitar, and Arthur played the accordion, and Bubba played the piano. And I used to go on these, because living in a pub, you see, they come in the pub and play. And I used to get lumber going on the outings, when they used to have the outings that used to go to Walton on the Naze, or the kids' outing, and the women's outing, and the men's outing.
Mm-hmm.
And one day, Georgie, I've been playing the guitar for a while, and Georgie Dance said to me, I'm going on the women's outing. He said, would you like to come with me? So I said, oh yeah. He said, we'll play our guitars on the coach. You know, fine. Never, 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 never again. Never again. Can you imagine? They were drunk before they got halfway to Southend. There's nothing. Well, I said to George, I've never known anything like that, George. He said, there's only one thing worse than a coachload of drunken women. I said, what's that? He said, 2 coachloads. And they were murdered. That was the last time, mate.
Right.
You know, but he'd play anywhere, George.
And then the next thing was, like, young kids learning guitar. You formed a group, which was the Ace of Clubs rhythm group.
Yeah, we didn't know how to spell the word rhythm, I remember that. I still can't spell it, I've got a block with that word. But yeah, I mean, in those days, Lonnie Donegan came on the scene.
Right.
See, I'd already had a guitar for a year or a couple of years before Lonnie Donegan, all the skiffle thing came along. So
Right.
I was well up.
Right.
I mean, I knew the 3 chords in any key.
Yeah.
So I was well up on it all. So when I came in, it was
Yeah.
great for me. Matter of fact, somebody sent me a copy of one of these skiffle programs that we used to do, these skiffle competitions. And there's 60 groups on it, and there's only one bloke playing electric guitar. It's free.
Right.
Because it was taboo to play electric guitar in a skiffle group.
All right.
Yeah.
Right. But Lonnie Donegan was a big influence on you,
Absolutely,
wasn't he? Yeah.
not only on me, but on everybody.
Yeah, and tonight, like, there's one number that you do by the Golden Day Quartet.
Golden Gate Quartet, yeah.
Yeah, and Leadbelly. Was Lonnie Donegan the guy who introduced you to that kind of stuff?
No, he wasn't, actually, because I was very surprised when I thought the Golden Gate Quartet was just they were very famous in America, incidentally.
Mm-hmm.
But I heard them actually playing on a Leadbelly record.
Right.
So, and Leadbelly wrote all the skiffle stuff, you know,
Yeah.
all the stuff, most of the stuff that Lonnie Donegan brought over was Leadbelly stuff. And of course,
Alabama
our
Bound.
kids in England didn't know where it came from. This was this bloke up there singing these fantastic songs about railways and firemen and all that. It was fantastic. We had nothing before that. What did we have? Some fella in a white suit shouting through a megaphone, you know, and
Yeah.
so it was a wonderful time.
So after that first, the Ace of Clubs band, you got the Spacemen Skiffle.
Oh, then I joined the Spacemen Skiffle group.
Yeah.
I was on the railway at the time. I was a fireman on the British Rail.
Right.
And I felt awfully qualified to be in a skiffle group because all the songs was about firemen on railways. The Wreck of the Old 97 and all them, you know,
Yeah.
Casey Jones. And
Yeah.
so, no, it was a wonderful time.
Right. And all that changed when Sid Rothwell brought Long Tall Sally to play to you.
Hey, I'll never forget that old Sid. He said, come round my house. And he had one of these... his family rented a record player from a firm called Radio Rentals. I think they're still going, I think, Radio Rentals. And in those days, they used to push a barrow around the streets with the TVs and not with the record players on. Because I applied for a job there, didn't get the job, but you had to push a barrow around. And he had one of these that his family hired. It was an electric one. You didn't have to wind it up, but you still had to put a needle in it. You know, the old needle. And he said, come round my house. And he said, I've got this record. And he got the old thing and he said, we'll put a new needle in for this. You know, it's a big deal, you know. Put the new needle in, put it on. That was it, you know.
Blew your
Fantastic.
mind. Yeah.
Little Richard, I'll never forget it. Go and tell Aunt Mary about Uncle John. Claim he had a music, but oh wow, what's this? It was absolutely incredible. And that was Goodbye Lonnie Donegan, Hello Rock and Roll, really.
Right, right. And then the next thing, you had a day job at that point. You had a few day jobs working for British Rail eventually, but then you got an offer of going to Butlins in Filey.
What a band. That's the worst band I've ever been in my life. It was
How did the offer come about?
oh, I don't know, someone said, would you come and do 12 weeks at Butlins? And I thought, yeah. I mean, funny thing was about the railway is that, yeah, you know, you could ask for leave, you see. So I'd say, well, I want leave on Friday because I've got a gig, or leave on Monday. And what went on, this went on and on and on until eventually I was doing more gigs than I was working on the railway, and I just didn't go back. And as far as I know, I might well still be on their books.
Right.
I could have a pension coming, you know. But, yeah, I mean...
But the band was Clay Nichols and the Blue Flames, yeah, but the music was terrible, but there were two things, as I understand it, the two things that were good about that band was, firstly, that led to the Joe Brown haircut.
Yeah, it certainly did, yeah. What happened was that we went up to this, I mean, I'd never been that far away from home. And we went all the way up there, and we played the first night, they hated us. Played the second night, they hated us.
To the extent where Teds were getting up on stage and giving you aggro,
well,
real...
Not so much me, but they whacked this singer about like it's going out of style. So I thought, well, this is no good at all, we need a gimmick, right? And I noticed they had this chemist shop on the camp, and they had this display thing, Philips electric razor. I think it was one of the first electric razors. And I thought it would be a great idea if someone was to shave their head. Because in those days, you know, that it was... If you saw anyone like that, he was a freak. If anyone shaved, he was a freak. So it fell to me to do it. So I used to go down there every morning and shave my head. And they used to paint this red, white and blue rondel on it, like a, you know. It done me for the birds because I couldn't get away with anything. You know, there he goes, that's a silly bastard, you know. But it worked. All the kids started coming in and to see this idiot with a shaved head. And we got the gig going, which was fine. By the time we'd been playing together a couple of weeks, I'd knocked it into some kind of shape, although it wasn't really my band, but I can remember bossing them around, saying, oh, it's terrible, you've got to play this, play that. And we got on with it. And then one day this bloke came and he says, now listen, I'm not happy. I said, well, they're coming in. He said, yeah, but it's the band. He said, you're not paying your way. He said, can anybody do anything else? What do you do? And I said to him, which is the truth, I said, well, my grandfather was a trick rider in Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, which he was. Oh, he said, that's interesting. You can be the riding instructor. I'd never been on a horse in my life. So I said, well, what do I have to do? He said, come with me. So he took me to the stables, and half a dozen of these rotten old horses, you know. He said, go up you get, and I'll get on this horse and I'm riding it around. I rather liked it, you know. And after a while, I wasn't doing too bad. Nobody gave me any lessons or anything. And he said to me, right, you can take them out on their rides, all the campus one. And this is what I had to do. I couldn't believe it. But in the stable, hanging up in a corner, was these horse brasses, right? And I thought they'd look great on my guitar strap, and also very handy. So I stitched these big horse brasses on this leather strap. And when the Ted's gone up to have a go, I used to whip it on and whip it around my head like that, and you know, I knocked a few teeth out with it in my time. And that was a good old do. The
useful armour.
It was. I think I can honestly, safely say that I started that horse brass business on guitars because it was out of necessity more than anything.
And what kind of style were you? You were lead guitarist in that band, were you?
Yeah. Well, we were playing rock and roll, like Buddy Holly stuff, anything we could play, really. Right. Just like everybody else. Yeah. I mean, we was all struggling to learn stuff that was coming over from America. We didn't have any music over here. We did after a while. We got some good British rock and roll going. Right.
How did that come about, do you think?
I think British rock and roll evolved with bands like Sounds Incorporated. Johnny Kidd and the Pirates had a great band, Mick Green on guitar. And my band was a good band. You know, we had a good band. And British rock and roll was different to American rock and roll. It wasn't until the Beatles that what the Beatles did was wrap it all up and send it back to the Americans. That's just what they did. They sent their own music back to them better. That's what they did. But it was... British rock and roll isn't the same as American rock and roll. I think in England, when it comes to playing rock and roll, we're inclined to think in fours, 4 in a bar, and play in 4 in a bar. So it's going boom, 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 bump, that kind of thing. Whereas America, they're still playing in 4-beat, they've got this, they've got this backbeat going on in their brains that we don't have. Listen to bands like Dave Clark 5, and you'll notice that it's just a load of bash rubbish.
Right.
You know.
Yeah. But it was your image that got you your first lucky break in a certain way, wasn't it? Because you got in touch with Larry Parnes, Larry Parnes gave you a ring, and you were auditioned on the Jack Good Boy Meets Girl. Well,
what happened there was that I was kicking around with a skiffle group, and I got a message from his office saying that one of his tours that he just started, the guitar player in the band had gone sick, and he'd heard I could play the guitar and would I like to go and play the thing. So I said, yeah, fine. It was at Southend. And I said, how much do we get? He said, 10 bob. Pay your own fare, you know, which was 9 and 8 pence. I thought I'm in show business. I went down and I did the gig, and after the gig, somebody said, look, they want the band to stay behind after the show because Jack Good was in the audience with Larry Parnes, and they were auditioning a load of young singers for what was to be the new old boy show, which was the big pop show of the day, and it was to be called Boy Meets Girls, and hosted by Marty Wilde. And we played for these guys, and they were all Elvis Presley lookalikes, really. We had 4 hound dogs and a Don't Be Cruel, you know, all sang the same song. And at the end of it, Jack Good said, I don't think I can use any of these boys, Larry. Not at all. He said, but who's the young chap jigging about on the guitar? Who is it? And Larry Parnes said, oh, that, he didn't know who I was. Someone said, it's Joe. He said, oh, yes, that's Joe. And Larry Parnes said, and who's Joe's manager? No, Jack Good said, and who's Joe's manager? And Larry Parnes said, why, I am. I never met the guy. You know, so the next morning I have to go down to his office with my guitar, 10 o'clock in the morning. I go in the office, I look around, it's like all these pictures of all these pop stars that he handled. And he'd given them all different names, you see. He'd given them names like, there was Marty Wilde, his name was Reggie Smith. But Billy Fury, his name was Ronnie Wycherley. And they had all these weird names. And he said to me, of course he said, Larry Parnes, of course he said, if you're going to be on the television, he said, you can't walk around with a name like Joe Brown. And I said, well, why not? Thousands of other people do. He said, you missed my point. He said, we want something that rolls off the tongue. I thought he's going to call me Dribble or something. In this bloody... Suddenly he says, Twitch. And I went, huh. He said, is there something wrong with you? I said, no, mate. I said, you said Twitch, I twitched. I said, please. No, he said, you don't understand. That's what we'll call you. He said, you'll be Elmer Twitch. I couldn't believe it. He must have seen me face. He said, oh, of course, he said, you'll have your own group. He said, we'll call them the Fidgets. I thought, no way, I ain't having it. Even at that young age, I thought, I'm not walking around with that on my passport.
Elmer Twitch and the Fidgets.
Elmer Twitch and the Fidgets. So I said, no. Big fight with him on the first day, but I managed to keep my name.
What was your first impression of Larry Parnes? You know, what?
I never met anyone like him. He was rich. I never met anybody rich before, you know. I've never seen a fitted carpet, you know. There I was in this office. I don't know. I just went and played my gig. I just went and played my guitar. That's all I've ever done, really.
And which guitar was it? Was it the famous Gibson by then? Or
Yeah,
did that come later?
It was actually.
So you must have shelled out a fair amount of cash early on.
No, it was part of my deal with Larry Parnes.
Oh,
I said, if you want me to, because don't forget, I'd already got the job from Jack Good. I didn't know this, but Larry Parnes knew it, as a lead guitar player on this show. And I said, the guitar I've got is a piece of rubbish. You'll have to get me a decent guitar. So he said, right, and we went round to Selma's and we bought this 335, Gibson 335, which I no longer have, actually.
All right.
But Roy Wood's got it, and he won't sell it me back. But I got one similar.
Right.
But that was the one I used on all the records and all the TV shows, because I did a lot of records as well without Larry Parnes knowing it. As a matter of fact, I did a record for Billy Fury once.
The Sound of Fury.
Parnesy must have known about it. Yeah, The Sound of Fury. And there was 6 musicians on the session. And last week, a fella sent me through the post. He said, a piece of paper. He said, I know the man that this photocopy belongs to. His name is Reg Guest, and he was the piano player on the session. And it was Reg's notes about who was to be paid what. And the whole bill for the whole band for the whole day was 29 quid. And my share was £2.12 shillings.
For that album?
For the whole album, yeah.
Which turned out to be what people...
a classic.
Yeah, people see as that is British rockabilly.
Yeah.
Things must have been moving very fast then, because you also, around that time, which is about sort of early 1960, January 1960, that came out. You met Eddie Cochran for the first time then.
Well, yeah. You see, what the great break for me was that this show, Boy Meets Girls, was the big pop show of its time in this country. So Jack started bringing American artists over when he brought Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran and Ronnie Hawkins. Oh, there was loads of them. Johnny Cash. Mm. And because they weren't allowed to have their own bands with them because of the Musicians' Union rules, we being the only young guys they came in contact with, got to go on the road with them as well. So I toured with these people. Learned a lot from people like Eddie Cochran, because there's one thing, Eddie was a great guitar player. And there's one thing about, you know, like I said before, trying to learn an American solo off the record. Right. Hearing it is one thing. Seeing it done is a different thing, because there's all kinds of different positions you can play those notes in on the fretboard. Right. And Eddie said, well, what are you going to do, Joe? He said, you forget these third strings. You can't bend them. He said, take the third string away, throw it away, put another second string on, so you could bend it. Right. We never heard anything like that in this country, because as soon as Eddie told us that, we were all doing it. Me, Big Jim, Sally, and everybody was doing it. Right. And as a result of just doing that, I was picking up sessions like they were going out of style. You know, I was doing sessions for Adam Faith and all sorts of people. Down at Joe Meeks, I was down there playing, you know, on his sessions. It was great.
Right. But when you toured with Eddie Cochran, I seem to remember seeing somewhere that he particularly, you and him got on good.
We got on great, yeah.
And on trains sometimes you would sort of go into the first class compartment. And
yeah, he'd always send someone down, go get Joe, and we'd sit up there in the first class playing, and Gene sat in the corner with his bottle, you know. It was it's funny though, you know, it's all happened in such a short space of time if you actually write the dates down, but it seems like a lifetime. Yeah, because there was so much crammed into it. Yeah. It was just all a great fun.
But the interesting thing about your career at that point is that, you know, I've asked around, so some people, guitar heroes like Peter Green said that you were Mr. Cool on the guitar. You know, when he was learning what he was doing, he was sort of listening to what you were doing on the Sound of Fury, etc. So there was that side to what you were doing. And yet the singles, some of the early singles that came out were you know, like People Got to Talk, they were showbiz schmaltzy, weren't they? They were going in two completely different directions. You were this cool guitarist. And
this is what I'm saying. I mean, I had no choice about it at all. They just put out what they put out. Yeah. It was crazy. I mean, if I'd have gone on to be, say, if I'd have gone into the entertainment side of the business and stuck to the guitar, then I may have made a living, not saying as famous as, but something maybe like Clapton or something, where I could have, you know, carried on with and just been a guitar player and not confuse people. Then I could have done that for a living. But see, with my rotten voice, I was prepared to take anything that comes along. I never wanted to sing in the first place. It wasn't my idea. It was Jack Good's idea. Right. I didn't want to sing. I wanted to stand at the back with my guitar and take the piss out of the singer. You know, I didn't want all the audience taking the piss out of me. Yeah. But it's just the way it goes. And I still love the guitar. It's my first love. Right.
And a picture of you was the first #1 that you got.
Yeah, the only number one. And even that's down as #2 in most of the things.
Right. But the voice on that, there's nothing wrong with the voice.
No, it's all right. I mean, I can sing that kind of thing, but I'm no Freddie Mercury. I mean, I'm not a singer. My voice got shot to pieces when I was screaming Jelly Dills out, was pushing a barrel around the East End. A throat specialist told me that, anyway.
Really?
Yeah.
I did permanent damage there?
Yeah, I haven't got any real tone to it. I enjoy what I do, and I only sing the songs that I can get away with. You know, I mean, I wouldn't be doing songs that I can't sing the blues or anything like that. I'm the wrong colour to sing the blues. Surprises me how other people get away with it, actually. How can it be the blues when they've all got big houses?
And a fleet of Ferraris.
Yeah, Ferraris, yeah.
That was a picture of you was 1962, so you'd had 3 very, very fast-moving years as Joe Brown guitarist, and then Joe Brown with the Brothers.
Yeah.
Then there was a gig where you topped the bill on the strength of Picture of You at the Tower Ballroom in New Brighton, and from what I gather from your book, that was a turning point, because further down the bill were the Beatles.
Well, I wouldn't say it was a turning point. I mean, we was just gigging. Brian Epstein used to run these little dances up in the Liverpool area. And the Beatles had just started, and naturally enough, he wanted to put them out with someone who was a star at the time. So he put them out with me, opening the show for me. There's no big deal about it. I mean, I knew as soon as I heard them that they were going to be enormous.
You did?
Absolutely, because of the sort of stuff they were doing. They weren't just run-of-the-mill thrashing out rock and roll. They were singing, even when they didn't have their own songs, they were singing songs like Bésame Mucho and songs like that, you know. And George had a great musical brain, and they all did.
Oh,
you know, I mean, but there's no big deal about working with the Beatles. They had to work with someone. They're the hardest working band of the lot. I mean, they spent all that time in Germany playing 5-6 hours a night. What a training.
So you did see the potential 100% that
I listened, see it, I had to follow it. They were very popular.
Yeah.
And we had a hard time following them on some of the gigs. We just didn't do the Tower. We did, must have done 20 or 30 gigs up there. As a matter of fact, our van broke down, and Brian Epstein lent us a van because we couldn't get insured. They wouldn't insure you in those days for anything. And we was doing that tour with a Nem's record van with all our stuff in the back. It was just a gig to me, another gig.
But what I said about the turning point is that, again, from your book, that you felt with the Beatles about to be on a roll, the last thing that you wanted to be was a fading, in your own words, a fading pop star.
Well, I don't ever remember saying that, because I'll tell you why. To me, it just goes on. Things just go on. With me, it's like someone come along and said, would you do a pantomime? Right? And I thought, yeah, okay. And I did a pantomime. And then I did another pantomime. And then someone said to me, how would you like to do a really posh pantomime? Cinderella, but it's really posh. And we're going to call it Charlie Girl, and you're going to go and star with Anna Neagle in the West End and do it. I said, okay. And this is what happened. I went along and did it. I've always tried to move about in business.
Right, so it wasn't as though, cause I've seen it written in places that the minute you saw the Beatles, you thought, got ahead.
It's a load of rubbish, because it's like, you've got to take it as it goes. And I've never been ambitious. I've never worried about the end coming. I always expected it to come in the next 5 minutes. You know, and we just went on with it. The whole thing with my career has just gone on. I've never been ambitious. I've never fought for anything that I wanted in this business. I've just taken what's come along and hoped I can make a decent job of it. I learned some lessons early. I've worked with some really good people who I had the common sense to realise that if I'm working with these people, I've got to learn something off of them. And I've been very lucky in working with some
Cochran
good people. Absolutely.
And what other names come to mind on that?
Well, like particularly with Anna Neagle and the acting side of it, and High Hazel and all these great actors and actresses. And I thought, well, there I am, Joe Brown, stuck in amongst this lot. I can't make a fool of myself. And as you know, if you're playing anything, tennis, football, acting, with someone as good, your game comes up. And if you're lucky enough to be with people that are good, and you don't learn anything off of them, it's your fault. You just don't deserve to make it. Couple that with the fact that I've always been reliable, and I've always turned up on time, which I still think is 90% of show business.
Just yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter how good you are, if you're not there, what's the point? Or people won't book you because you're unreliable.
And Charlie Girl, despite getting bad reviews on the first night, went to, you did 3 years on Charlie Girl?
I did 2.5 years, the show ran for 6.5.
Yeah.
It was one of the biggest hits in the West End's had.
And that was in the mid-60s?
Yeah.
Now, with all that was going on in the mid-60s, you know, the Beatles and the Stones, and also on the sort of British blues side, the rise of the guitar hero, did Joe Brown, actor, going in to the West End to act every night, did he think, hang on a minute, I think I kicked this one off, and, you know, it's like gone on its own, shouldn't I be there in amongst them?
Well, absolutely, because one of the things about Charlie Girl, I never played my guitar at all. I didn't play anything for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
And being how much I love the thing, I mean, I was just devastated. I had to get out eventually.
Right.
But
and that was with a little help from my friends when that was
that rubbish I did, you know, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I got talked into some dreadful things. You don't learn till you're too old to do it, until they stop offering. But I mean, my career's been, this business has been very good to me, really, and I'm very happy to be doing what I'm doing now. After all that I've done with the, you know, I've done 3 or 4 West End plays, and I've even directed one.
How did you enjoy the film world? Because the first film...
I don't like filming much, and that was another lumber that we used to get lumbered with films. Everybody, Cliff and Elvis, and all of them, I'm sure they all would hate the films that they did. The
exploitational films they were called, weren't they? If you got a hit record, you've got to get...
Mind you, having said that, the first film that I did, What a Crazy World We're Living In, was an established play anyway, down at the Joan Littlewood's Theatre at Stratford East. It was already a musical play, so it didn't just start off as a romp, it had a storyline. Right. And we also had some great actors and actresses in it from the Joan Littlewood Company. Avis Bunnage played my mother, great British actress, and what's his name, who played Harry H. Corbett, he played my father.
Right.
Grazina Frame was my sister. There were some great British actors in there. And once again, tried to learn from it. And they shot it in black and white. And it wasn't because colour wasn't around, but you see them early pictures, them early films of Cliff, the colour is the most appalling thing about it. It's everything so bright and, you know, but Crazy World was a drab kind of film, because it was a drab kind of story. And I think, not because I was in it, honestly, but I think that What a Crazy World We're Living In was the best of a bad bunch.
Right.
That's what I think about the filming. I've done other films which I'd cut my leg off for, I did again. I did one called 3 Hats for Lisa.
That's where you had a foot double, wasn't it?
Yeah, foot double, yeah.
I knew there were body doubles.
Oh, yeah. I tried so hard, man. I tried so hard. They said, no, you can dance. I said, I cannot dance. I can't even tap my foot in time with the music. I said, every time I get a new drummer, which is very often, I tell him, don't you watch my foot for the time. You keep your own time. I'll follow you. Because I'm well out. My foot is always well out. But I worked so hard on this dancing business. And I thought I'd got it all off. I thought I was Jack the Lad. And when I came to see it, they dubbed someone else's feet on. Right. I wouldn't mind if they put a decent pair of feet on there. These tiny little twinkling little toes go... No.
Passing them off as yours in the final film.
Yeah. And Gillian Lynn was the choreographer. I must have drove that poor woman to distraction, because I had a mental block about it. I'd even had to paint left and right on my feet. It was murder, and never again. So now if anybody asks me to do anything, I say, yep, I can do it, but no dancing.
That was the sort of late 60s, and that was also you slowly getting back into music by doing the Cabaret Scene in the late 60s. But then something that hasn't been too well documented was Brown's homebrew.
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, let me tell you about the Cabaret Scene. The Cabaret Scene all started to come up while I was in Charlie Girl, and when I came out of Charlie Girl, the thing to do was the clubs, because they'd all been Batley Variety Club and Wakefield Theatre Club, fabulous. They were great to start with.
You enjoyed it, yeah?
To begin with, until they turned into fish and chip shops, until the people turned them into fish and chip shops. Jimmy Corrigan said, I'm wasting my time with this lot, Joe. He said, I tried to give them something decent, all they want is bloody fish and chips. So I went and did that, and I did that, and 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 I thought, oh, I could never do it again. Because I couldn't see what else I could do for a living. I was earning a good living doing the clubs, but I couldn't see what else I could do. I'm dreaming about doing theatres until my manager now, John, said, well, we should try. And when we started, as I say, we started doing the small theatres, and then we built it up and up and up, and now it's great.
But Brown's Homebrew...
Oh, Brown's Homebrew,
that lasted for a couple of years, didn't it? Yeah.
Well, that was a very, very expensive experiment, which financially I wish I hadn't done. But artistically, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Right, right.
And that was, funny enough, it was all down to Roger Cook, my friend Roger Cook, the songwriter. Because he was in a band called Blue Mink.
Right, yeah.
And we were doing this TV show. I loved all this country rock music, you see, but they wanted him to do this TV show. Now, let me think. It was Roger Whittaker's show. And they said, would I go along and sing this song called She's Got the Biggest Balalaika in the Balkans? Right? And I said, no. And I said, well, you can do another song of your choice. I thought, OK, I'll do it if we can do a country rock song. Do what you like. So fine. I think their idea was to do it and chop it out, you know. So I got the band together and said, we're going to do this country rock song. And I've got this record, I've heard this song I like called Down on the Yukon Railroad. I've forgotten the name of the group. And we listened to it, it was really good. We could learn this one. I said to my drummer, Dave, we need a fiddle on this, you know. He said, it'd be great with a fiddle. I said, well, is anyone, you know anyone that's got a fiddle? He said, no. I said, wait a minute, my cousin had a fiddle. I'll ring him up, I said, you still got that old fiddle, Jim? He said, it's up in the loft. I said, can I borrow it? He said, yes. I went and got it. Put some strings on it. I've never seen it, never touched a fiddle in my life before. But I figured out that the two middle strings, if you play the two middle strings, the A and the D, you've got a chord of D. If you play the top two strings, which is the E and the A, you've got a chord of A. Play the bottom two strings, the D and the G, you've got a chord of G.
Right.
So I figured, if we're playing in the key of D, there's only 3 chords in the song. All I got to do is just change the chord like that. And like in about a week, I was going ring-a-ling-a-ling-a-ling, and it was sounding pretty good. Anyway, we went and did this show, and everyone said, how long's he been playing the fiddle? It's incredible. It wasn't, it was just a trick.
Right.
Roger Cook said, I like that stuff you're doing. He said, no, Joe, he said, you should be making records like that. I said, what, country rock? He said, I'd love to record you. He said, why don't I produce a record with you? He said, I'll book the studio next week.
Wow.
I thought, oh, yeah. Gone. He phoned me up, he said, I booked a studio. I couldn't believe it. He'd actually booked a studio at bloody Air London too.
Right.
You know, the best studio in town. You have got some songs, haven't you? I said, yeah. And me and my drummer just sat down and wrote all the songs. Just like that. To a deadline.
Right.
And that's how our own brew started.
Yeah.
But we did the typical thing. We went overboard with it all. You know, it was typical British. You know, everything had to have a reason for it, and it was all, well, if we're going to be hippies, right?
Yeah.
Well, we've got to grow our hair. So I used to have big long hair down here with a big full set. Gone was a cheeky chappy, totally gone.
Did you feel comfortable in that new
No,
image?
I felt horrible because the bass player, this bloke from Liverpool, Joe Fagan, he had a bit of success, old Joe, but he was our bass player, and I said to him, now look, Joe, when it comes to talking to the audience, doing all the chat, I'm not going to do it. You do it. Okay. So there I am, stood in the band, right, while this bloke Joe is up there doing all the chat, something that I could have done 20 times better standing on the head. But because I was a hippie, I wasn't going to do it. And it was all like that. I mean,
Yeah.
and what's more, Brown's Home Brew were going out for like 200 quid a night. And Joe Brown and his brothers was going out for 500 quid a night.
Right.
And they all soon found out about this. So what they were doing, they were advertising all these terrible clubs we were playing in, you know, advertising Joe Brown and his brothers. And then when the day we got this, sticking the Brown's Home Brew posters up, very naughty.
Right, yeah.
So we finished up playing this heavy, heavy rock music. And we had a PA, oh, you wouldn't believe it, one of the bins was as big as this room. And we were playing these tiny little working men's clubs in Cornwall with all this equipment and all these people sitting there with bow ties on.
Yeah, yeah.
It was incredible.
Right, right. So it was financially just non-workable, basically.
Disastrous. We spent God knows how many hundreds of thousands of the record company's money, and I had to mortgage my house to carry on with it.
Wow.
So, you know, it was a disaster, but it was a great period in my life. I loved it.
Right. And on the musical side, coming up to the 90s, there's a big change. You got a new manager in the 90s, and Nashville started to figure in your life a lot. You as a songwriter.
Yeah, only because once again Roger Cook used to live, well, he still lives there, and I went over to stay with Roger and got into that way of thinking. And it's a wonderful musical atmosphere over there in Nashville.
You go over each year, don't you?
I go over as much as I can. Everybody's a songwriter, everyone. It's embarrassing. I mean, you're sitting in a taxi and the guy driving a cab and he says, hey buddy, you in the music business? I say, yeah. Well, when you get a chance, have a listen to this. We've all got tapes, you know. Poor old Dee Murray, Elton John's late bass player, he played with me, Dee, he was one of my bass players, and then he joined Elton John and he went to live in Nashville. He's a lovely guy, and he died a few years ago with cancer. One of the black drummers that I played with over in Nashville, Chucky Burt, he said to me, I had it with this town, man, I had it with this town. So what do you mean? He said, I went to Dee's funeral. I said, yeah. He said, they was passing tapes around at the funeral. He said, I think that's terrible. He couldn't understand that, you know. But that's what that sounds like.
Right.
Music, that's it.
Yeah.
The waitresses, any waitress, any Nashville waitress can sing the arse off of any country singer we've got in this country. Absolutely, they live it. They're good at it. They got no qualms about it. They just do it, and they do it so much better than we do.
But when, with Roger Cook, you got your chance in Nashville to do an album on a day like this, you got the cream of Nashville musicians, didn't you?
Yeah, that was quite recently, that album. Roger put together a band. He said, you like country music, I'll put together a band and we'll do it. And I went over and did it. But to be honest with you, that was once more, it was a great lesson for me. Because I went over there full of nerves with a typical English musician's attitude about these great people I was going to be working with. And as a result, I just sunk into the background myself. What I should have done is said, okay boys, should have had a bit of self-confidence and okay, this is the way it goes.
Right.
You know, this is the way I want to do it.
Yeah.
But I didn't. They said, well, why don't we do it like, yeah, okay. Do you know what I mean? And let them get on with it. And it was a great musician, it's a great track, but I don't think I'll stamped any authority on the record.
Right.
If I ever did it again, I wouldn't pick country songs. I'd use their musicians, but I wouldn't pick country songs, because those guys can play anything anyway. Yeah. They just play it with great feel.
Yeah. And one of the songs off there, You Were Everywhere, is on your set list tonight.
Yeah, that's I think that's one of the songs that I managed to sneak on of my own on the album.
Right, which you co-wrote with a guy from Fat Mattress?
No, well, yeah, but it was Jim Leviton.
Yeah,
right. Fat Mattress he was with. I still see Jim, he's a great bloke.
And in a couple of weeks' time you're going to have, as this Cheeky Chappy tour comes to an end, it comes to an end at Glastonbury. Are you looking forward to that kind of audience?
To be honest with you, no, I'm not, because I'm not really sure what I'm in for.
Right.
But I think the most important thing is to go in with the right mental attitude to it, which is something that I'm not very good at. I like to make sure that everything's going to be right before I step on the stage. It's an old trick, and it works. So I'm not sure about how my songs are going to go down there, that's all. But, you know, Rolf Harris did it, and he went out and did Jake the Peg.
Right.
Well, he told me it's going to be great. Just go and do it. But see, he's got that great attitude, Rolf. Yeah. He's a one-off, that guy. He's got that great attitude.
Right. When I saw you at Liverpool last week, there was only one disappointment when you came on stage. What's happened to the cowboy boots?
I've still got them.
You have?
I've still got them, but they make me lean forward too much. Actually,
the Johnny Cash ones are still in good nick.
I've still got. No, they're not in good nick, but I've still got them. I can still wear them. They've been repaired. But seriously, cowboy boots on a rake stage is not funny. Right. Because we do a lot of theatres now, the stage is raked. Right. And you know, you're bending forward all the time. It's very fatiguing when you stood there for 2.5 hours in cowboy boots. Right. You're meant to be leaning back on them, so they don't get worn. And
another thing that you're working on at the moment is a musical about skiffle.
Yeah, old Roger Cook and myself decided that we'd write a musical play about skiffle and the 1957, when it was all really happening in this country for the kids. It really was happening. Skiffle was just on its way out, and rock and roll was coming in, and it was a wonderful time. And Roger said we should capture this.
Right.
And this is what we're trying to do.
Right. And when might that be sort of in the West End?
Might be in the West End next year.
Right. Right. Joe Brown, Cockney Cowboy. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
And may I say, you know more about me than I know.